Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was Anko and Tayuya's boyfriend, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Razuhfy, link is in the description, also subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. Faint voices could be heard, as Naruto began to wake up from his involuntary nap. His ears were still adjusting, and his body felt incredibly heavy. His head was also pounding. As if something hard had hit him. The voices had an echo-like quality to them. Slowly, but surely his hearing was able to level out. He heard two feminine voices. Both of which he was familiar with, one more intimate than the other. Do you think I headbutted him too hard? Tayuya's rough voice was questioned out. I highly doubt so. The boy is more hard-headed than the stone that makes up the Hokage mountains. If he were to have internal damage from his soft headbutt, then he's clearly not as strong as I thought. Kat's voice struck out shortly after. Having an amused undertone to it. One which slightly annoyed Naruto. They're both loud and obnoxious. It came out groggy and had a drawl to it. As if the boy didn't feel like fully committing to speaking it aloud. It served to amuse Kat and annoy Tayuya. To which she responded, as per usual. Listen here you little shit. If it weren't for me the Anbu would have knocked your stupid ass out. She glared at the boy as he, to no one's surprise, glared right back. Yeah well, listen here you little midget. You didn't have to headbutt me. Tayuya leaned in closer as she fired back immediately. It's not my fucking fault. You're the one who got mad in the first damn place. Naruto's upper body leaned up slightly as he challenged back. It's not my fucking fault that I have a giant ass fox in my stomach. Tayuya's eyebrow twitched and she proceeded to lean even closer to the boy. Their noses touched as she bellowed into his face. You're a fucking idiot. Quite succinct really. As amusing as this was to Kat, she knew she had to step in before they started to throw fists instead of words. Uzumaki's. The woman thought to herself while shaking her head. You two can continue your lover's spat some other time. The entire hospital can hear both of you. I get that one of you is a sub and the other is a dom, but we tend to keep such things in private. Save that for when you're both alone at home. The statement was said with a great amount of amusement. Their reactions almost made her chuckle. Red colored Tayuya's entire visage, while a spark of pink dashed Naruto's. Tayuya immediately sprung back from the boy's face while sporting an annoyed expression towards the Anbu member. Naruto turned to glare towards the woman as well. Their shared shout surprised her slightly. Fuck you. They both shouted towards her. Yuga frowned with a slight sweat drop. These two were practically soulmates. If they didn't end up together, she'd retire and become a farmer for the remainder of her life. Those thoughts caused a certain memory of hers to surface. A handsome man with bright yellow hair sleeping soundly in a hospital bed, such as this very one. A woman with vibrant red hair stared at the man in concern. Her hands would occasionally brush the top of the man's hands while she waited for him to awake. The memory caused a pain to rack through her chest. Spreading across her entire body. She had to force herself to halt the shudder that wanted to surface. Kushina. Her teacher. Her idol. The woman she looked up to, as a mother. Yuga wanted to be like Kushina. Confident, strong, and beautiful. She was everything Yuga wanted to be. She even picked up the art of swordsmanship because of Kushina. Learned to wield swords with her left hand instead of her right. Just like her teacher. The purple-haired Anbu had self-taught herself to become ambidextrous. Wielding her katana in a reverse grip like her teacher had. A shudder she couldn't prevent hit Yuga's body. Her right hand clenched fiercely. If she weren't wearing gloves she was sure she would have cut skin and been bleeding. She had cried and mourned for Kushina when she found out the woman had passed. Her son was left an orphan. Not even Minato had survived. These thoughts continued to hammer into Yuga's very soul. She was the first person to volunteer to watch over Naruto. She would be damned if the son of her teacher would suffer in this village. She had killed many villagers for the boy. Hiruzen knew. There was no denying it. But the man would hold his hand. The tears slid down the woman's face. Naruto had grown up wondering if his parents abandoned him because of the Kyuubi. Never knowing if they truly loved the boy. She oh so badly wanted to tell the boy that Kushina would go to hell and back for him. She would fight an army of thousands just to get to the boy. Minato she didn't even want to think of what he'd do if he had lived and something threatened the boy's safety. That man would fight gods to see his son's safety. He fought the Kyuubi. Most seemed to think the Bijuu was on par with gods. She knew she'd be executed if she were to tell the boy. It was the law. Hiruzen may have let the killings go unanswered, but Yuga would not live to see the next day if she told the boy. But the boy deserved to know who they were. The purple-haired woman steeled her thoughts. She would die today. And she would die with a peaceful smile on her face, knowing she would bring Naruto happiness. Yuga was certain the boy had an inkling of who his parents were. Well, his father at least. But she could tell him. Confirm his suspicions. He'd finally have the knowledge that those two loved him unconditionally. The woman reached for her mask so that the boy could memorize the face of the woman who had protected him his entire life for 14 years. To put a face to Cat. Her hands touched the porcelain plating of the mask as she prepared to introduce herself and inform the boy of his parents. Well, it looks like our little fox has finally woken up, eh? A voice stopped her dead in her tracks. She knew exactly who was speaking. That lazy drawl. Her hands still on her mask, her eyes snapped to the doorway. Leaning against it was none other than Kakashi Haddock. Her old Anbu captain and Minato's student, his visible ebony eye fixated directly on hers. He had the attention of both Tayuya and Naruto, but he was looking directly at her. She knew the look. She knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want her to throw away her life. Her other hand clenched so hard that she actually did manage to draw blood. Kakashi had a sad look in his visible eye as he gazed at Yugao. He knew the woman wanted to tell Naruto. He remembered this exact scene. Having walked in on Minato sleeping while Kushina sat nearby, he could tell why the woman wanted to tell the boy. Kakashi also believed the boy was deserving of knowing who his parents were. But he wouldn't let Yugao throw her life away. Kushina or Minato would want this. Yugao wasn't privy to the knowledge that Kakashi possessed regarding Naruto's parentage. It's not that the third Hokage forbade it because he felt the need to do so. It was because Minato himself forbade the knowledge. Despite how intelligent Kakashi was, he could never understand why his sensei would feel the need to do so. The third Hokage knew, but it's not like he would reveal it to Kakashi. He merely stated that it was Minato's doing, and until time presented itself Naruto would remain ignorant of his parents. Kakashi thought that sentiment was bullshit. If it was due to assassination attempts, they'd never get within 50 feet of the boy. Yugao was a hawk. A censor and an incredibly diverse fighter. She was known for her talent with a sword, but she was deadly with mostly anything. I want to do this. Kat's voice came out calm and collected despite her inner turmoil. Naruto glanced at the man who seemed so familiar to Dog and then to Kat. She was happy yet scared. But why would that be? He could also feel sadness and regret directed towards him. What did she regret? He was still a little groggy, but he'd know if Kat had done something that would garner the emotions. She had always protected him. He didn't understand. Ayuya's eyes narrowed at both of the shinobi in the room. Her sensing abilities may not be as powerful as Naruto's, but she could practically taste the tenseness that hung in the room. It had to deal with Naruto. The way the whiskered teen's eyes shined with recognition towards the lanky man meant that this was one of his old watchers. It had to be. The way that Kat responded to the man only proved it. This man was in some way her superior at one time. And considering the woman was an Anbu captain meant this was her previous captain. But if that was the case, why was there uneasiness in the room? If you do, you can't go back. The one-eyed man's voice responded to Kat. He pushed his body off the doorway and took a single step into the room. He had blocked the entrance. The only other being the open window behind Yugao. Yugao glanced towards the windows. She could sense them. 15 other Anbu members are waiting. Watching. She wasn't a fool. She knew what would happen should she take this mask off. They'd all give her the time to tell Naruto who his parents were. But after that, they'd all strike. Even Kakashi. She was absolutely confident that she could deal with the 15 members behind her. It was the monster that was in front of her that scared her. She knew how strong Kakashi was. He was an S-rank shinobi for a reason. She wouldn't last 5 minutes against the man. But this was all assuming that the purple-haired woman would fight back. No. She'd say what she needed to say and bend the knee. Pat. Don't. Do. This. Every word came out slow and measured. Yugao's hands lightly shook. Tear drips were slipping beneath the mask dropping to the floor. Ayuya's eyes snapped back and forth from the man to the woman. This woman. Was she about to? Pat, why are you crying? I'm okay. See? I'm doing just fine. You don't need to worry about me. Naruto had a soft smile as he directed his gaze towards the woman. Assuming that she was sad because he had gotten hurt and didn't prevent the Kyuubi's chakra from progressing. After all, it was his fault he got angry. There was a very long silence after Naruto's statement. Yugao's shoulders shook as a few more tears dropped from her mask before she took her hand off her mask. Leaving the cat-themed mask on. Her masked visage turned towards Naruto's and stared for a few seconds. Naruto's smile stretched larger when the woman gazed at him. Yugao's head dipped once, and with that gesture, she disappeared with a body flicker. Kakashi's shoulders relaxed, and he gave a short exhale. He had buried enough bodies of his comrades. He didn't want to do another. Especially not a former subordinate. And definitely not a student of the wife of his own teacher. Kakashi directed his vision towards Naruto and Tayuya only to blink and furrow his eyebrows at what he saw. Naruto was staring at the spot that Yugao had been standing in with a frown and eyes narrowed in sadness. He had sensed the pain in her heart. She was hurting so much. It was almost overbearing to the teen. She was ready to die, wasn't she? The whiskered teen's voice came out soft and quiet. Tayuya frowned slightly at his tone. That woman was indeed ready to die. For what? The redeed had no clue. But it had been something regarding Naruto. She wasn't as talented with sensing emotions as her cousin, but even she could see the wave of sadness being projected from the woman. Kakashi's hands found their way into his pockets. He stared at where Kat had been standing and sighed. You are correct, Naruto. She was. For what reason? I cannot tell you. I am forbidden by law to do so. The statement was said with such ease. As if it had been rehearsed hundreds of times. It wouldn't be far off from the truth. The former Anbu captain had gone over a plethora of things he could say to his sensei's son. He would eventually be placed on Team 7 along with Sasuke and Tayuya. Kakashi knew the reasons. Didn't care as long as he got to teach Mini Minato and Mini Kushina. Aren't you Kakashi Haddock? The asshole who knows 1000 or whatever. Despite how rude that question was, Kakashi couldn't help but smile slightly at it. Tayuya was a lot like Kushina. Well, Kushina wasn't as crass as Tayuya was, she still had her moments. They both shared tempers though. Maybe all Uzumaki women had short tempers. Tsunade was quick to jump to destruction and Mito was said to stomp on Hashira when he annoyed her. That's 4/4. Yeah, they were just violent. He gave his signature eye smile at the duo. The one and only. Now, let's talk break. Sasuke stood with his arms crossed watching his mother spar with his brother and cousin. Spar was a light term. They were blitzing all over the field and the occasional fire would ring out. Scorching the field and causing smoke to fog the area. His Sharingan was activated revealing the pair of two swirling slowly. Next to him sitting on the ground was Shisui's younger sister Ray. Which he had an infatuation with. Her hair was disheveled similar to Shisui's. Long ebony tresses flowed down her back with no discernible pattern. She had a bang that hung below her left eye. Ray shared the same unique eyelashes that her brother possessed. Her eyes were more slanted than her brother's. Reminiscing to that of a feline. A beauty indeed. She too had her Sharingan active watching the fight. Though she only possesses a single pair of tomatoes rather than two. She glanced toward Sasuke and pulled a knee up to her chest and hung her right arm over it. Hey Sasuke, her voice was gentle and soft. She was different from many of the Uchihas that resided in the clan. Soft-spoken and kind. Both she and Shisui shared their kindness, but other than that they were completely different from each other. The male turned his attention to his crush, yeah. She didn't reply at first. Pursing her lips as she thought of what to say. About Naruto, that chakra. He's Sasuke's full attention now on her, she stuttered slightly. The boy in front of her was slightly intimidating, but she knew he didn't mean to be so. He was actually very sweet. Well, to her at least. She thought so anyway. He's different. Sasuke nodded at that and gestured for her to continue. Patiently waiting for her to continue. Neither noticed that the spar in the background had ceased. His chakra was red. And he had slitted eyes, she slightly frowned before continuing. He's Kyuubi's jailer, isn't he? She turned her gaze completely on him. The villagers always disrespect him. But he never had done anything wrong. The girl's fists tightened in anger. She hated rude people and bullies. It's why she was so confrontational with the other members of the Uchiha clan. They were always so rude to others. It annoyed her so much. Sasuke looked down at the ground at her response. He was glad that she wasn't judging Naruto for it, but it still saddened the raven-haired male. Naruto carried such an enormous burden. It was unfair to the boy, but nothing could be done about it. Sure, the chakra had frightened him, but the feel of the chakra wasn't necessarily evil. Angry, yes, but evil? No. Sasuke sighed as he nodded his head. Yeah, he does. Sasuke possessed a small frown as the statement left his mouth. Ray gained a frown and tears of frustration appeared in her eyes. She had always been an angry crier. It was probably the attribute she disliked most about herself. But that doesn't give anyone a reason to treat him like he's not a person. It's not fair. Sasuke sighed as he sat down beside the girl and wrapped an arm around her, pulling her into a side hug. The girl leaned her head on Sasuke's shoulder. Yeah. It's not fair. But there's nothing we can really do, Ray. What do you mean there's nothing we can do? We could be friends with him. She accused him lightly, though she remained attached to the boy. Sasuke gave a small smile at the statement. I meant the villager part, Ray. Naruto and I are friends. Kinda. I think at least. He shrugged at that. Can't be sure. He doesn't talk much. But we speak with our fists. So I guess that makes us friends. The girl's cheeks reddened slightly at his statement. Do you think he'd want to be friends with me? Her eyes glanced toward Sasuke's face. The young teen narrowed his eyes slightly and shrugged lightly. I don't see why not. I think the reason Naruto chooses to remain alone is because it's what he's used to. Ray furrowed her eyebrows at his statement, slightly confused. But isn't Tayuya always around him? The petite retard was always with the boy. Ray doubted she'd ever seen the girl not next to the blonde. In a sense, yes. But it hadn't always been that way. Tayuya came into Naruto's life when he was older. At least that's what my mother and Itachi always said. He had been alone mostly up until that point. Most of what Sasuke knew about Naruto was from his brother and mother. The little interactions he would have with Naruto were pretty mundane. But that was probably due to the fact that Sasuke didn't know how to approach the blonde. He'd figure it out eventually. Maybe they'd be on the same genin team. I'm glad to see you two thinking rationally about Naruto's situation. It gives me hope that the future of Konoha will thrive under this generation. Mikoto's voice rang out to the two young Uchihas. Their heads both turning to see the three older Uchihas staring at them. How long were you listening to us? Sasuke hadn't even noticed that their spar concluded. They all seemed perfectly fine. Except for the slight single markings on their clothing, you wouldn't believe they had been chucking air rank at each other for the last 2 hours. Shisui gained an easy smile at his cousin's question. Since you started it. So baby sister. What's this with you and wanting to be friends with Whiskers? Thought you wanted to marry Saz. The man was cut off as Ray leaped at the man, knocking him down to the ground and covering his mouth. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Her entire face was crimson as she struggled to hold her brother down. She was fully aware of the fact that her older brother was letting this happen. His shoulders were shaking with mirth as he tried to contain his laughter. Itachi had an amused smile adorned on his face while Mikoto smiled softly. Sasuke was slightly surprised at the statement and reaction. Before it could go any further, Itachi decided to step in. The Reaper of the Uchiha clan gently tugged the young girl off of his best friend and gave her a pat on the head. Ray pouted at the gesture before being poked by Itachi's middle and index finger on her forehead. He had a soft smile on his face whilst doing so. It was something that Itachi had always done. Shisui had even started doing so as well. She didn't fully understand the gesture, but she was sure it wasn't anything negative. He did it to Sasuke the most. Ray had even seen him do it to his mother when she was stressed out over a situation. It had calmed her down significantly and she seemed more at peace. Did he have the magic touch? The golden question. Anyway, come you two. Mikoto gestured with her right hand as she started to walk out of the clearing. The woman had a grace that beheld confidence. There was little in this world that could faze the woman. She was an S-rank shinobi after all. We are going to get cleaned up and we'll spend our time out dining in the village. I expect you in particular, Shisui, to behave. I will not tolerate your antics. Understood. The matriarch of the Uchiha demanded. Despite being phrased as a question, the entire group knew it was a demand. Mikoto rarely demanded things, but when she did, you listened. Yes ma'am. The prodigy answered back. Mikoto may be fond of the Shunshin master, but when she wanted something done in a particular way, you abided by it. He had seen her wrath once before. He did not wish to see it again anytime soon. Break. The rhythmic sounds of wood clacking against each other was heard as two similar-looking males played a match of shogi while a young teen watched on. You are getting better every day, son. The older male praised. The sounds of several soft clacks resonated before the younger male responded. Still not good enough to win though. Both voices had a lazy drawl to them. As if speaking was something that was far too much trouble. Soft crunches could be heard coming from the other boy who watched a father-son duo battle in tactics. Quite fascinating to witness in his opinion. Shikamaru. I heard something interesting happened at the academy today. The clacking noise ceased at Shikaka's statement. So I did the crunching. Shikamaru stared at the shogi board as he recalled the event that had happened. Kyuubi's chakra was something to behold. He couldn't comprehend how much anger and hate could be stored. It scared him. His eyes narrowed at the board as he articulated his thoughts. Naruto's eyes held so much rage during that period. And if he was being honest, he didn't truly know if that was Kyuubi's influence or if that was Naruto projecting his anger. The second option was honestly more believable to the young genius. Shikamaru was a people watcher. He may be lazy like all his other clanmates, but he was slightly more motivated than many of them. His father exploited that one a lot. Troublesome. The phrase comes out reflexively. He put his hands together in his lap as he thought of Naruto's situation. The rage and anger was justified. This village had treated him like dirt. Tayuya and the boy's pseudo-mother were the only two people that were constants in his life. And both of them were women and violent. That was something Shikamaru wanted no part in. Naruto was a fair guy. Antisocial at many times. Blunt to the point of almost being rude, but so was his cousin. He assumed all Uzumakas were like that. He was also incredibly strong. The amount of physical strength and raw chakra the boy had at his disposal was awe-inducing. And the teen held back at the academy. Though, he'd absolutely smear Tayuya into the ground after school when most of the civilian children went home. Their spars were brutal. Shikamaru was positive that bones and muscles were constantly torn or broken during their spars. How his cousin could stand after getting thrashed for hours was something Shikamaru couldn't fathom. The Uzumakis were known for their longevity and chakra pools. Unless that longevity had something to do with the rate at which their body healed, then he was stumped. Maybe. Toji was the first to speak though. Well. Naruto got angry. It was honestly scary. Everyone knows that Naruto has a lot of chakra, but that was just insane. I thought the walls were going to cave in. The chubby boy had a frown on his face as he recalled the experience. Shikaku merely nodded his head while studying the shogi board. Did you feel like you were in danger? The question came out plain enough. But Shikamaru knew the underlying meaning. Not necessarily, but I didn't feel exactly safe either. Come to think about it, Choji had only really felt anger. Naruto was angry, but his facial expression didn't match. He just stared directly at Tayuya's face without looking away. His face was actually blank the entire time. Could he project his emotions with his chakra? Choji's eyebrows furrowed as he thought about it. Shikaku made a humming noise to the boy's response. What about you, Shikamaru? Anything you have to say? Shikaku continued to eye the board. Having not looked up since asking his first initial question, Shikamaru closed his eyes as he thought of why his father decided to bring up the subject. Shikamaru was the smartest individual in the academy. He knew Naruto and the Kyuubi were connected. He knew that his dad knew that he didn't care about the Kyuubi situation and Naruto being its jailer. So why would he ask? Shikamaru stared at his father's face. But he couldn't decipher what the man was getting at. Could he be overthinking this? Sure, Naruto may not be undyingly loyal to Konoha due to his treatment, but he was most certainly justified. His answer a few days ago regarding becoming a shinobi was questionable. But the genius doubted that Naruto would go rogue when he did become a ninja for Konoha. He loved Tayuya and his mother too much to do so. It didn't help that the village would have a hand on Tayuya's and Anko's throat should that happen. But it also meant that Naruto would release the Kyuubi should that happen. Which meant that Naruto held a considerable amount of power in this village, relatively speaking. Shikamaru furrowed his eyebrows as an extremely concentrated look appeared on his face. Shikaku's smile of pride went unnoticed. While this village didn't particularly need the Kyuubi's power to be successful, it was an incredible boost. Should Naruto leave, Konoha would lose an incredibly gifted shinobi and the Kyuubi. The Hokage couldn't stop him from doing so either. Threatening the life of his cousin and his mother would only result in the Leaf's destruction. Was that why the shinobi in the village respected Naruto? It made sense. You don't anger the person who has your life in their hands. Literally and figuratively. Naruto held the lives of thousands upon thousands of people. Should he do it, this village would disappear. And Naruto knew this as well. There was no way he couldn't. The boy was intelligent. He might not have a photographic memory and a 200 IQ like every Nara possessed, but he wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what he was doing at all times. Naruto holds our lives in his hands and there's little we can do about it. It's better to get along with the emperor than go against him. Shikamaru opened his eyes as he responded. Shikaku gave a smirk at his son's statement. While Choji may not understand what he was referring to, his son did. Naruto wasn't a threat to Konoha until Konoha was a threat to him. Good. You understand. Also, checkmate. Shikamaru's sigh of frustration made Shikaku's smirk grow larger. Break. The outdoors always calmed her mind when she had a lot to think about. Nature, flowers, trees, fresh air. It was always so relaxing. Most of the others at the academy seemed to think she was more of a civilian than a shinobi. The girl rolled her eyes at that. There was nothing wrong with wanting to look and feel good. It's not like she ever shirked her training. She wasn't the strongest in her class, but she wasn't weak. There were some monster prodigies that resided in the class. The Uzumaki duo and the two Sharingan-wielding Uchihas came to mind. Ino sighed as she thought of what happened earlier. Beside her, another young woman from her class that was actually pretty talented for being was a girl named Sakura Haruno. The girl had some strength to her. Ino respected any woman who took her training seriously. The pink-haired teen was currently laying down in the field of flowers. Gazing up at the clouds while thinking of Naruto. She was intelligent. Intelligent enough to connect the dots between Naruto and Kyuubi. After all, he was the only individual who had been born on October 10th. It was pretty obvious. She was fortunate that she chose the shinobi route. They taught the basics of sealing and how it worked. The lessons didn't get too in-depth considering how complex sealing actually got. The only people who would likely understand were the two Uzumakis. So she understood that Naruto and the Kyuubi were two different individuals. It wasn't that complicated either. Naruto was a singular entity and so was the Kyuubi. They didn't merge. That was impossible. She shook her head slightly. Hey Sakura. Did what happened today scare you at all? The blonde-haired girl questioned her best friend. Sakura's eyes glanced towards her best friend. Ino was holding a flower and sniffed it. having the effect of relaxing her entire body. Sakura thought of what she wanted to say. Yeah, she was kind of scared. Not Naruto per se. He was intimidating, but he was never scary. When sparring in the academy, unless you were Sasuke, Tayuya, Kiba or Ray, he went easy on you. Considering those four were incredibly skilled in close quarters combat, she was grateful for that. The teen was strong as fuck. She sighed as she responded. A little bit. But I wasn't scared of Naruto. It was definitely the chakra that got me. Naruto has always been intimidating, but I never felt like I was in danger around him. She shrugged lightly at that. What about you? Ino didn't respond immediately, which slightly surprised them. Ino wouldn't have asked the question if she didn't already have an answer to the question. She turned her head towards the girl. Honestly, I thought it was kinda hot. The young Yamanaka responded with a shrug of her shoulders. It was admitted with no shame. It both surprised and didn't surprise Sakura. You're unbelievable. Sakura's voice was as plain as Sai's personality. He didn't have one. That was saying something. Ino didn't seem to care. Which wasn't surprising really. I don't know. There's something intoxicating about it. It's not like I want to get raped or anything. But being at the mercy of a man who's stronger than you in every aspect is pretty hot to me. She wasn't ashamed of saying it. The teen obviously meant for it to be in private and controlled environments. Like she stated, she didn't want to be touched against her will or anything. Sakura could understand that. But it wasn't really her kink. She shook her head at her best friend's comment with a smile. Tayuya would wring your neck if she heard what you said. The young teen had a small smile on her face which proceeded into full-blown laughter after all the color drained from Ino's face. Yeah. I'm good. Naruto's hot as hell, but I like living. The young heiress joined Sakura in laughter. Break. The dog barking resonated in the background of an enclosed training area. A young male with an above-average sized nin dog lay beside each other looking up into the clouds. After a small amount of time, the boy with red tattoos on his face asked his companion a question. Are foxes considered canines, Akamaru? Kiba questioned his brother-in-arms. The dog responded with a low bark and a few yips. The tattooed teen then nodded his head at his partner's words. Yeah. I agree, buddy. The usually boisterous teen was surprisingly mellow today. I wonder if he can smell and hear as good as us. The dog responded with a questioningly growl. He's a cool dude. I have no beef with him. The simple life of a simple man with his simple dog. Not that complicated. Break. The sound of flesh impacting flesh could be heard as two females traded blows. Both women had pale white eyes and long dark hair. One being navy blue and the other light brown. They were very similar in appearance, the only real difference being their hairstyles and the shape of their chins. The two women exchanged a flurry of blows before the older female punished her younger sister for overstepping. Striking out with her leg and impacting across the younger girl's temple. She slammed hard on the ground in a daze. The older female didn't advance. She relaxed her stance as her younger sister struggled to get up, still slightly dazed from the kick. You are progressing far quicker than I was at your age, Hanabi. The woman had a soft smile as she helped the girl to her feet to balance her. The brunette wobbled slightly as she put a hand to her temple. Geez. You didn't have to be so brutal, Hina. The girl gave a low groan afterwards. The Nada smiled at her adorable little sister. I have to be brutal. Otherwise you won't learn. If I baby you here, how will you grow outside? I do not wish to see you 6 feet below the ground like mother. Hanabi flinched slightly at the statement and looked down to the ground. The older sister gently led her younger sister to rest on the benches that surrounded one of the many training grounds in the compound. Nearby, a tall man with similar features to the young woman watched silently. Hey sis, did you feel that chakra today? The brunette questioned. Yes, I did. Hinata's response was short and curt. Well, do you know where it came from? Hanabi questioned far more hesitantly. The older sister glanced towards her and then closed her eyes. Naruto Uzumaki. An interesting young man. She was obsessed with the boy. Not in the romantic way or anything. But she wanted to surpass him. He was strong. Oh, so very strong. He was an aspiration to the pale-eyed heiress. She went through hours upon hours of bone-breaking and muscle-tearing training sessions to one day stand above the boy. Why? She didn't truly know. Maybe she was projecting her father onto Naruto. She hated Hiashi. Her sister knew it and the man himself knew it. Naruto was nothing like Hiashi though. The two couldn't be more different. The only thing they had in common was that they were strong. She had wanted to be strong. The anger towards her father provides the necessary fuel to keep her going. She didn't dislike Naruto at all. Him being the Kyuubi's container only made her want to surpass him even more. An unhealthy obsession she had, but it is what it is. The man had turned his frustrations on his daughters after his brother and wife perished. He became cold and hateful. She wanted to tear his eyes out and fish out his organs with her bare hands. The young woman took a deep breath before calming herself down. She knew she was exuding her chakra. It would only serve to scare Hanabi further. No, she would be the mother Hanabi didn't have. It came from a very powerful boy in my class. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. He is the strongest student in the academy. He is most likely stronger than many of our active duty chunin. The response was soft and delicate. It worked as Hanabi's shoulders relaxed. Wow, that's cool. The girl had a smile on her face as she responded to her big sister's proclamation. Do you think he'd give me some pointers? The 12-year-old girl was practically bouncing in excitement. Hinata gave a melodious laugh at her sister. You will have to ask him yourself. He is a very busy man. She smiled as her sister slightly deflated. The young girl had a slight confidence issue. It wasn't anything major, but she was shy when meeting new people. Well, okay, she sighed as her big sister pooped her on her nose. Hinata received a pout from the young girl. That up. We go again. I want you to give me everything you got. I will only defend. She immediately dropped to the Hyuga's prized fighting stance awaiting cannabis charge. The girl gave a huge grin and proceeded to pounce at her sister. Break, father. It is logical to be scared of what Naruto Uzumaki is capable of, should he get angry, correct? A young man that wore black sunglasses with heavy apparel asked an older male with similar features and clothing. That is indeed logical. Why? Because the boy is strong and harbors a great burden that not even the combined forces of Konoha could defeat. Shibi responded to Shino. The young male nodded his head slightly at his father's response. Highly logical indeed. Shino concluded that Naruto was an enigma and further surveillance would yield more progressive results. After all, one needs to think with rational thought when dealing with any situation. Logic dictated it so. The fist rocketed against her jaw, snapping her head to the left. The blow dazed her. The taste of copper that she had grown so used to filled her mouth. The hit forced her back 2 steps. The boot filled her vision, the trajectory on course to her temple. She instinctively ducked, knowing that retreating in this circumstance would be more of a detriment. Follow your instincts, he would constantly say. Fuck him and fuck instincts. Low to the ground, she knew what would come next. That same boot altered its course on hair, slicing through the air down towards her crown. She snarled as she contemplated that split second, choosing to dash forward. A slight widening of the male's eyes brought her great satisfaction. But she couldn't revel in it. She sprang forward and wrapped her arms around the lower half of his legs. She locked her arms together. Before the male could retaliate, she grit her teeth as she mustered all the strength she had into the lower half of her body. The petite woman gave a shout that would make warriors from old proud and proceeded to lift the boy several feet in the air. The young boy's first instinct was to find a purchase, but he knew that that task was impossible. He was airborne already and there was little he could do but brace for the impact. The Redeed bent her back slightly as the boy reached 8 feet into the air. She mustered the remaining strength she had to slamming the boy into the earth. The male hit the surface hard, fissures forming from his descent. A sharp exhale of breath left his body as he grit his teeth from the surprising maneuver. His back stung and the wind being ripped from his lungs shocked him slightly. Knowing that the boy would recover, Tayuya positioned herself atop the boy's stomach, slamming her pelvis down and then proceeding to give 3 solid punches to the teen's jaw. The boy twisted his lower body to the left, forcing the Redeed to scramble slightly. The whiskered teen then struck out with his left fist and nailed Tayuya on her cheek. The shot hammered the girl's skull and she was stunned. The girl was unprepared for the boot that struck her ribsage. The force of Naruto's kick caused Tayuya to rocket 20 meters across the training ground, skidding across the earth multiple times before halting. The blow caused the Redeed to vomit up blood mid-flight. She lay on the ground for a few seconds while Naruto stood panting for air. Tayuya's groan echoed out as she desperately tried to claw herself back on her feet, struggling to move because of the devastating kick to her ribsage. The bastard definitely broke some of them. Her breathing was ragged. She managed to get on her hands and knees and another volley of spit and blood ejected from her mouth. Fucking shit. The outburst was said through clenched teeth. Her hands gripped the dirt as she tried to stay conscious. Her vision darted black the entire time. Several individuals on the sideline watched as Tayuya struggled to get up. Ray, Ino, and Sakura being the ones to wince while Sasuke and Kiba had an eyebrow raised. That girl was tougher than a lot of men in this village. Kiba had seen several of his clan members go down with weaker attacks. Sasuke stood with his arms crossed next to Ray, who had a small frown on her face. She just doesn't give up, does she? The ebony-haired girl asked rhetorically. The girl was slightly concerned for the Redeed. Tayuya had been going at this for 2 solid hours. Is that it? Come on, Yaya. You're better than that. Naruto was goading her into anger, using a nickname he had reserved for her in private when they were younger. The girl's anger was what motivated her. It was the main reason she kept getting up. She wanted to punch the smug fuck. She also wanted to do other things, but that was for her own pleasure. Tayuya's body responded to the taunt. Balling her fists on the ground, she pushed herself up and stood on slightly wobbly feet. She was caked in sweat and dirt from continuously grappling with the boy. Her sports bra was torn at the strap, barely clinging on. Her leggings were ripped in certain areas, but she didn't care. She spit up more blood and then proceeded to dash at Naruto to wipe that annoying smirk off his mouth. "That's what I love about you." He responded in kind and dashed back at her. The boy had a wild grin on his face as he met the challenge of his cousin. "Sounds like another trip to the Erdemi. I wonder how much money they've racked up because of their training," Ino questioned aloud, using her fingers as a gesture to the training bit. "I doubt they pay anything, to be honest. The hospital sees these two almost every day. They probably have their own sectioned off area with doctors waiting on standby." Sasuke mused with mirth. These two were animals. In a good way, of course, but animals no less. 30 minutes in the ring with Naruto and he'd be done. The group had gotten together to train after the academy had released. Though, not training like the two titans going at it right now. Ino and Sakura had worked on perfecting their chakra control. Ray and Sasuke had done some light sparring with their sharingans, while Kiba practiced his clans with Akamaru. The group had basically tagged along with the duo. Tayuya tells them that if they annoyed her, then she would cut them with a rusty kunai. They wisely did not annoy her. Naruto did though. He got a pass from the Redeed. She only socked him in the mouth, and here they were now. 2 hours later. Beating the shit out of each other. The group wondered if this was how they showed love for one another. A quick 1-2 smashed into Tayuya's face. The girl had tried to feint but was too slow to successfully pull it off. She was getting tired. As much damage as she gave to the boy, he returned a double. Naruto shifted closer towards her, rearing his right fist towards her. In a burst of speed, the Redeed coiled her arms around the punch and wrapped her legs around the side of his right body. Entrapping the arm in her grip, she dropped all her weight on the boy as he went crashing down. She managed to get a lock onto his right arm and proceeded to bend it. Naruto grit his teeth as his cousin grappled him into an armbar. The boy knew she would break his arm without hesitation. She had done it dozens of times. He tensed his arm as much as he could and hit the girl in the liver once. Twice. Thrice. On the third, the girl coughed up blood, staining his right arm with the liquid. But she persevered and was rewarded for her efforts. A loud cracking noise echoed in the clearing as she managed to snap the boy's arm. Naruto grunted loudly and gritted his teeth. The Redeed's grip slightly loosened as she broke his arm. The teen slammed his left fist into her side another 3 times before Tayuya was forced to let go. She hit the ground with a loud thud. Before she could even think of moving, he was on top of her. His right arm hanging loosely, he reared his left back and hammered it into her cheek. She gave a loud grunt and her head snapped to the right. He backhanded Tayuya afterwards while he readied his fist to hit her again. Tayuya's eyes were half-lidded as she tried to cling to the little amount of consciousness that she had. Blood dribbled down the left side of her lips and she sported several bruises on her cheeks. Her hair was matted and splayed all on the ground behind her. Her chest heaved as the fight finally caught up with her. She couldn't move even if she wanted to. No amount of taunting would be able to bring her back for another bout. No, her cousin had thrashed her. She was fucking exhausted. But why was she still awake? She finally focused on the male in front of her and he was just staring at her in awe. Tayuya would frown if she had the fucking energy. Why was he fucking staring? It was pissing her off. But at the same time, the look he was giving her, it was as if she was the only woman he'd ever seen in his life. His eyes were glazed over. The beautiful sapphire eyes gazing upon her face. Why the fuck was he staring? She looked like shit. She had to. She was bleeding and dirty and fucking bloody with bruises everywhere. Why is he still staring? Tayuya's heart started to beat faster. He seemed to be leaning in. She belatedly realized he had lowered his fist. Why was he leaning in now? Why was she so nervous? What the fuck was happening? Naruto continued to stare at Tayuya's face in wonder. Despite the dirt and dried blood that caked her cheek and lips, she was so beautiful. The way her hair fanned out behind her. Tangled and grimy with sweat. She was like a goddess. A warrior goddess. She sported a confused scowl, but her cheeks were pink. He wanted to. The boy began leaning his body closer to hers. His heart was pounding in his chest as he neared her face. Their foreheads met in a soft motion. Their noses tickled each other. They were both breathing heavily as they stared into each other's eyes. All he had to do was lean closer and she could taste him. She had wanted this for so long. So many nights she had dreamed of this moment. Not this exact moment per se, but to be able to taste his lips. He needed to lean closer. Just fucking do it already. The girl's thoughts raged in her head. He had wanted to do this for so long. To have her below him in a situation like this. To feel those delicate lips intertwined with his own. To taste her. To feel her. He wanted it. He needed it. He was positive Tayuya wanted this as bad as he did. Well, what do we have here? Anko's voice sounded directly beside them. Their eyes turned saucer-like. The woman had a Cheshire grin fixed on her face. I leave for a couple of days and you two finally decide to swap spit, eh? My own son and daughter are partaking in such debauchery. In front of an audience as well. Have you two no shame? Naruto and Tayuya's horrid expressions doubled, not tripled, as they both fully realized what was happening. Naruto scrambled off the redhead as she mustered enough energy to scoot away. Naruto's cry of pain resounded as during that lapse of judgment he put his full weight on his broken appendage. Tayuya managed to sit upright and tried to calm her breathing. She was so aroused and so fucking embarrassed. She could see all 5 of her classmates staring at the cousins in shock. Their eyes were as wide as they could possibly go. The girls blushed, but the boys were just shocked. She just wanted to fucking slit her own throat now. The whiskered teen was no better. Cradling his broken arm, his face was an explosion of cherry red. He closed his eyes and tried to block out everything around him. He had never felt so embarrassed in his life. The worst part about the situation was that they didn't even lip lock. They were so close. Just one more fucking second. Just one. Anko smiled at their embarrassment. Oh, she lived ruining good things. Well, perhaps she could have let them kiss first before interrupting. That would have been better. Now she not only had one Uzumaki upset with her, but she had 2. And one of them possessed the strongest entity in the world. That's not good. Their embarrassment was quick to switch to anger and rage. The 5 young teens immediately knew what was coming after the woman interrupted them. They wisely chose to flee from the Uzumaki's wrath. Anko gave a sweat drop and decided she didn't get paid enough to deal with this. So she also fled. One Uzumaki's wrath was bad enough, but 2. And one had the fucking Kyuubi. Hell to the fucking no. Break. So you wanna talk about what happened or are you gonna pussyfoot around it? The blunt statement of Tayuya directed toward her cousin. She had her arms crossed slightly while she leaned on the wall of their kitchen. Naruto glanced at Tayuya with an eyebrow raised. You're referring to what happened at the training grounds, yeah? He was sure that was what she was getting at. But it was Tayuya. Literally anything could set her off. She'd probably get mad if he chose to leave his boots outside instead of inside. The Redeed scoffed lightly with a scowl, a beautiful scowl in Naruto's opinion. Yes, you stupid asshole. You gonna act like it didn't happen? This wasn't good. The midget was getting mad and Naruto didn't want to deal with an upset Tayuya. Well, kinda. He loved when she was angry. But not when her anger was on him. Was he weird for that? The boy shook his head and instead focused on Tayuya. His eyes drifted towards her lips. He subconsciously licked his lips lightly while deciding how he should approach the situation. He had always loved the girl, both in a familial sense and when he started noticing the opposite sex. But she was all he ever looked at. There were many women in Konoha. But there was only one Tayuya and there would only ever be one. And after that little event at the training grounds he knew that she felt the same. The Redeed may not say it out loud, but she definitely did. He would pretend to ignore the girl ogling his body when he was shirtless. She was usually always shirtless, so he got a free show every day. A smile graced his face. He couldn't picture himself with anyone other than her. Come on, Yaya. You act like you didn't like what happened. He had a sly grin on his face. She wanted to punch it off. Her eyebrow twitched as her cheeks blushed a dark red. This fucking cocky fuck. She wanted to punch him, but she also wanted him to throw her on the couch and a few weeks had passed by since that exhilarating experience and her cousin had still denied to repeat it. They kept their daily routines of training, academy, more training, eating, beating the shit out of each other, and finally sleeping. Repeating the process for several weeks. Tayuya was getting desperate. She wanted him to pick up where he left off. He had stated that he couldn't wait to taste her. Why was he not doing so? He didn't even lick his fingers after their sexual encounter. Her anger was beginning to seep over what it normally would. She was quick to agitate, more so than she used to. Anko had noticed and just gave annoying sly smiles to the girl. The fucking dango slut knew something she didn't and it pissed her off. If her dumbass cousin didn't fucking touch her soon she was going to start cutting people. The girl's fingers started to dig into the table she was sitting at. Hairline fractures began forming before a loud snap rang through the classroom. Some of the students turned their attention to discover the noise only to grimace and snap their attention back. Tayuya's scowl was fierce. The broken wood was crushed in her hand after snapping it off. Her chakra was raging around her as she glared in front of her. The weight of her chakra caused discomfort to settle on many of the teens in the room. Haruka's eyes glanced towards her and wisely chose to ignore it. He figured she would calm down eventually. If not, well, it wasn't his problem. There were only a few days left before the students would graduate and become ninja for the village. Tayuya would be Hiruzen's and her sensei's problem after that. He would be free of the Uzumaki duo. They were talented, but far too much trouble. Naruto glanced at Tayuya with a sly smile. It'd only be a matter of time before she snapped. Perhaps he was pushing her anger a bit too much. If he wasn't careful, she'd strip him in the classroom and mount him immediately. He wouldn't put it against her. Her chakra was becoming a bit much though. He idly noticed that even some of the heirs and heiresses were becoming affected. They weren't uncomfortable, but he should probably calm her down. The midget would gut someone if they even looked at her right now. Naruto reached his right hand over to the girl and began to gently run his hands through the tresses of her crimson locks. The effect was almost immediate. The tenseness in her shoulders disappeared, her eyes closed slowly, and a soft sigh escaped her mouth. The pressure of her chakra dissipating. "I hate you so fucking much." Despite the harsh words, it was said calmly. Naruto smiled at the response and continued to drag his fingers through her hair. It was beautiful. He had always loved it. It smelled divine as well. She really did take care of it. That's not what you were saying a few weeks ago. In fact, I specifically remember you stating the opposite. The response was something only she would understand. The class knew of their interesting relationship. The heirs and heiresses weren't entirely sure if the two were intimate, but if the massive blush that appeared on the girl's face was any indication, then they could assume the two were. It also shocked them that the girl hadn't retaliated in usual Tayuya-like fashion. She had just accepted what the boy said and didn't challenge it. "Stop it." Her voice was uncharacteristically soft. Sasuke's eyebrows furrowed in confusion as he glanced towards Ray to see if she was hearing what he was. Her own eyes were wide in surprise at that. "Why?" He continued his gentle gestures as the girl's head leaned towards the blonde. She was in bliss as he worked his magic on her tresses. "Because it's embarrassing." Her upper body was now slightly leaning on his chest. "There's nothing embarrassing about telling the people you love that you love them. It's embarrassing to me, but I love you. You're not going to say it back." The Redeed gained a small frown while her body slightly squirmed in discomfort. The Jinchuriki could tell that she wasn't comfortable with showing her true emotions in front of people. They were speaking quietly to each other, but she knew several others were listening. Naruto, the Redeed's eyes opened and she rotated her head to gaze at her cousin. She really didn't want to do this in public. She was uncomfortable and he knew it. But the petite girl knew he wasn't doing this on purpose. The whiskered teen just smiled back at her and continued to run his hands through her hair. She realized that he was letting her choose. She pursed her lips and thought of what she wanted to do. The Redeed hated showing her more vulnerable side. People took advantage of you if you showed vulnerability. The fact the boy could be so open with himself even after his life was something Tayuya longed to be able to do. Her defense mechanism was her anger. It was something she had grown accustomed to. She frowned as she struggled on what she wanted to do. Her cousin continued to gently run his hand across her hair and even grazed her arms. It calmed her down and she glanced back towards him. He had a small smile and his eyes were closed. As if nothing could bother him. She remembered the conversation they had a few months ago about how other people felt in regards to who you choose to love. It made her frown. Why was she getting so worked up about this? Was it because she loved her cousin? No, that wasn't it. That wouldn't embarrass her. Incest was pretty common, at least in shinobi clans. Something that both of them were a part of. Was it because she was scared? That seemed more reasonable to her. She didn't want to be alone again. To go back to those days of fending for herself. Scared that should she open her heart that the whiskered teen would just take advantage of her. But she knew he'd never do that. Sure, Naruto would piss her off because he thought it was funny. But he'd never take advantage of her for malicious purposes. He was genuine in anything he did. She belatedly realized that he had truly confessed to her and she to him on that day. Why was this bothering her then? She already knew how she felt and quite frankly, she didn't give a fuck what others thought. The Redeed felt so fucking stupid. She was making everything seem so much more complicated than it really was. She gave a small smile as she closed her eyes and finally responded. "I fucking love you too." Naruto just chuckled at her response and pulled her closer. Yeah. I know that you fucking midget." A loud smack echoed in the room followed by a male grunt and several teens laughing. Break. The Uzumaki duo were walking back to their apartment after deciding to forego their daily training schedule. The exams were coming up soon and Naruto was feeling lazy. The whiskered teen had his hands in his pockets as he glanced at the small stands pawning their goods. There were always unique items on display in the bazaar section of the village. Tayuya was scanning the few stalls that actually managed to catch her attention. Things like jewelry and other womanly accessories were never her thing. She was a fighter and kunoichi at heart. Some of the items made her eyes roll in annoyance. "Hey," the blonde's voice questioned as he slowed his walk while still glancing at various stalls. Tayuya glanced towards her cousin and gave a humming noise to indicate she was listening. The boy's eyes narrowed as he stared at a particular stall that had charms on display. Do you believe in charms? Tayuya's eyebrows furrowed at the question in confusion. You mean like the voodoo shit that's popular in the Western culture? She stood next to him and directed her sight to the stand he was staring at. Not voodoo necessarily. But like good luck charms and stuff. He questioned back while eyeing her for a second. She looked annoyed by the follow-up question. I don't know. I'm not super religious and shit. But I guess I'm slightly superstitious. After all, your seal involved the literal death god. I mean fuck it. Sure. She shrugged her shoulders ending her statement. The teen crossed his arms as he stared at some of the charms. He could feel a slight energy resonating off some of the charms. He assumed that some of these were actually blessed and used in ceremonies by priestesses and the like. The boy gestured with his head for his cousin to follow him as he walked in the direction of the stand. Tayuya rolled her eyes as she followed after him. Naruto reached the stand and ran his eyes over several of the charms. Some being necklaces with unique gems and treasures and others being plain wood and other simple materials. One in particular caught his eye and seemed to pull him. It was a necklace of sorts that seemed like something from the more western side of the world. It was held together by a simple silver chain. The necklace is fairly short. Short enough that the pendant on the end of the chain would come to rest in the middle of his chest. The pendant was interesting in that it was pitch black in appearance. It was that of an upside-down triangle in the center of a circle, heavily contrasting the bright silver that adorned the chain. His eyebrows furrowed as he continued to stare at the item. Tayuya glanced at her cousin as he seemed completely transfixed on the item. She took a look at the item and gave a heavy frown as she slightly recoiled. The Redeed pulled her head away as if she had been burned. The item just seemed wrong. She couldn't explain it. The fact her cousin didn't seem bothered by the necklace confused her. The girl snapped her head up to look at the merchant who owned the stall. The man was wearing robes that covered his whole body. Black at midnight and a hood that obscured his face. She couldn't get a feel for the man and it slightly unnerved her. Hey Naruto. Hey. Tayuya shouted, getting his attention. She jostled him slightly and the boy shook his head as he noticed Tayuya looking at him in slight concern. The fuck's up with you? For a second it seemed like her cousin didn't know who she was before he shook his head and blinked multiple times. He glanced at the shopkeeper and then the necklace before landing on Tayuya and then going back to the merchant. Tayuya was shocked to see the boy glare at the shopkeeper. His chakra spiking and covering the entire area in a thick blanket of malice. Many of the villagers froze in fear at being in such close proximity to the boy. Shinobi who were on standby and several Anbu on patrol stopped and gazed at the scene. Their eyes narrowed as they witnessed the boy staring down a man in all black with a hood. What the fuck are you? The whiskered teen practically spat the words at the man. His body was tense as he stared at the merchant. Every fiber of his being was telling him to kill this man. The vile feeling coming off the man serving to unnerve Naruto. The shopkeeper gave a small grin at the question and responded in kind. I'm merely a simple traveling merchant. Making a living selling unique jewels. The voice of the individual being deep and having a low baritone. Naruto's eyes bleed crimson and his whiskers turned feral. A red miasma developed over his skin as his chakra slammed down into the area. His mouth pulled back into a snarl as his fingernails sharpened and lengthened. The teen gave a low threatening growl. Several shinobi in the area began to move civilians out of the area while the Anbu members moved closer to the three. Positioning themselves on the rooftops overlooking the conflict. The malicious chakra encased around the boy forming two long ears over his head and a single tail that swayed in slight agitation. The feeling of this man is vile. I do not like it. It reminds me of the gods of old. A low, threatening growl emerged from Kurama. Naruto in turn growled as well. Getting the exact same feeling from the man. Everything about this man was just wrong. Naruto couldn't explain it, but he knew. And right now, this man was in close proximity to Tayuya and he'd die before he'd let anything happen to her. The Jinchuriki stepped in front of Tayuya protectively while another growl ripped itself from his throat. Many of the shinobi now stood off to the sides watching. Having evacuated many of the civilians, they knew that something threatening would need to occur for the blonde to actually physically manifest the chakra cloak. You're vile. Staring at you is angering me. Kyuubi wants me to kill you. I will ask you again once and only once. What the fuck are you? The chakra cloak has changed the teen's voice to something far more deeper with a slightly demonic undertone to it. Tayuya took several steps back from the two men. The girl knew that something was wrong if her cousin manifested the chakra of the Kyuubi. His skill at sensing emotions was far more stronger than hers. He would know if something was wrong. The hooded man was silent for several seconds staring at the boy. His grin grew larger at the sight of the boy. He would need to push him more. You would listen to the opinion of a demon before listening. The man was cut off by Naruto as the boy lunged forward, wrapping a single clawed hand around the man's throat, lifting him several feet into the air as a snarl ripped through his throat again. I would sooner slit my own throat before letting you disrespect the fox. The man's hands instinctively tried to pry the boy's hands off his throat, but to no avail. The Jinchuriki squeezed harder before slamming the man into the ground directly in front of him. A ginormous crater appeared as a wave of dust and dirt rocketed from the brutal slam. Blood shot forth from the man's mouth as his hands continued to try to pry the clawed hand off. The blonde snarled again before picking the body up and flinging him across the market. The hooded man's body rocketed into a wall, destroying it as well as continuing his flight through it. Naruto gave a low growl as he stared in the direction of where he sent the vile creature. You have a lot of nerve calling the Kyuubi a demon when you're not even remotely human. The building that was destroyed from the blonde's throw shook slightly before the man emerged from the stone looking completely unharmed. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he gazed upon the unharmed man. He had launched the man as hard as he could. Any normal person's neck would have snapped instantaneously, killing them. This further proved that the man was anything but human. The hooded man gave a low chuckle at the boy as he raised his arm slightly by his sides, similar to that of a priest reaching enlightenment. Yes, you will do just fine in aiding our goddess. The man's deep voice rang out. When the time comes, you will surely answer her call. Everyone's eyes widened as the man pulled out a long jagged dagger that had several runic kanji inscribed in it. The man proceeded to slit his own throat. The entire time the man was laughing as he gurgled and choked from the blood seeping out of his cut artery. The Jinchuriki stared at the spot for a short while longer before all of his muscles relaxed and he gave a low sigh as the chakra receded. Many of the shinobi stood in slight shock at the scene, while several Anbu went to inform their Hokage of what transpired. Tayuya's eyes were wide, staring at what had happened. The boy hadn't hesitated when the creature mentioned Kyuubi. Her cousin took that personal. Naruto? She questioned softly and was unprepared for the boy to scoop her up into a hug. He locked his arms around the petite girl and squeezed. One hand ran through her hair and the other gripped her lower back. Tayuya was motionless for a second before wrapping her arms around his broad frame, returning the hug. I'm okay, Whiskers. I'm okay. She assured him lightly. The boy inhaled Tayuya's scent to further calm himself down. Naruto's eyes opened and he glanced towards the hand that rested on Tayuya's lower back. In his hand was the necklace that was on display with a unique symbol. You are playing a dangerous game, Naruto. Kurama's voice echoed in the boy's mind. The man didn't die from the throw. That dagger is what did the job. This pendant holds the same feeling as that dagger. Naruto pulled away from Tayuya while silently putting the pendant in his pocket. You heard what he said. And there are only two goddesses I know of that would be related to that pendant. The fox informed Naruto. Though I do not know which. They are too similar to discern without proper study. But that man was a priest for them. And she has chosen you. Naruto frowned lightly at that. This wasn't good. Not the slightest. Naruto began walking to the man's corpse, pushing past a few Anbu members before kneeling beside the inhuman creature. He eyed the dagger and reached out to grab it before his hand was caught. Naruto's eyes snapped to the left and in his vision was Kat. She was staring at the boy with her head tilted. They remained looking at each other while the other shinobi watched on. I'm taking it. Tell the old man. He continued looking into the eye holes of the mask without blinking. They will wish to confiscate it and study it. Kat countered easily. They will have to take it from me with force. Silence permeated the area at the whiskered boy's statement. Kat and Naruto staring at each other unflinchingly. Tayuya started to frown and was ready to stop Naruto before Kat simply nodded her head and disappeared with a shunshin. The boy grabbed the unique dagger and felt a slight pull of his chakra. The symbols on the dagger glowed a dark red before going back to normal. The teen frowned slightly while flipping the dagger around in his hand. Naruto eventually flipped the dagger and caught the handle before placing it in one of the sheaths he carried. He turned to see Tayuya giving him a scowl. The boy gave a low sigh knowing she was going to be upset. Fuck me. Break. Naruto was laying on his back on the couch. The dagger he had taken from that priest laying on the coffee table. Tayuya was chewing his ear off at having taken the very dagger a religious nut slit his throat with. How fucking stupid are you? I mean seriously, he slit his own throat while fucking laughing. Laughing. And you want the damn thing. He could have been using it to sacrifice virgins and shit. Or cutting open women that he'd rape. I mean what the fucking fuck. Naruto sighed as the girl ranted on and on while walking beside the couch, proceeding to inform him of how stupid he was. The teen rolled his eyes before reaching out, grasping her hand and pulling. The Redeed gave a surprised yelp at the action and found herself laying on top of the boy. A dash of pink appeared on her face at the sudden move. The boy wrapped his arms around her and closed his eyes. I love you too, Tayuya. She squirmed slightly before just accepting what was happening. She proceeded to lay her head on his chest and listen to the sound of his heartbeat. The rhythmic sound lulled her to sleep. "I love you too, Dumbus." Several minutes passed by and the whiskered teen gently shifted himself to place the girl on the couch. Even while asleep, the girl refused to let go of him. He let her do so. Shifting his body to sit on the couch, the teen sat on the edge of the couch as one of Tayuya's hands remained attached to his waist. He gave a smile at that before his attention turned to the dagger on the table. The whiskered teen pulled out the necklace he took from the stand and held the chain in between his hands as he studied the symbol of the pendant. He reached out and picked up the dagger with the other. The teen began to idly flip the knife through his fingers, skillfully twirling and flicking the blade without much effort as he contemplated what the man said about aiding his goddess. The items were no longer giving off a vile feeling, but he could tell something was wrong with them. Naruto stopped twirling the dagger and put both his hands together in an all too familiar hand sign. His index and middle finger came to rest on one another and a surge of chakra caused a shadow clone to appear beside him. The clone locked eyes with the boy, then glanced towards Tayuya. The clone gave a tilt of his head with an eyebrow raised. Naruto raised a medallion in his hand as he showed the clone what he was holding. "Go to the library and find anything you can on this symbol. There is a goddess related to this thing. I want to know exactly what it is. Now go. I don't want to deal with your stupid dual personalities right now." The teen gestured with his hand for the clone to leave. The duplicate raised an eyebrow before giving a two-finger salute and disappearing in a burst of speed. Naruto narrowed his eyes on the necklace. "What are you?" The boy glanced back at Tayuya and gave a gentle kiss on her cheek before prying her hand off of him. She gave a low hum of discontentment before it stopped. The whiskered teen began to strip as he headed into the shower to contemplate what would happen now that he had the supposed attention of a goddess. The clone that Naruto had previously sent to research the goddess found information almost immediately after looking up strange symbols involving female gods. Though, there were two goddesses and they were incredibly similar. Both were about death and destruction and wreaking as much havoc as possible. But only one would use the symbol that the teen held in his hand. Jashinism, the literal definition of the word being evil god or wicked heart. This goddess was that of one who revealed in the chaos of destruction. Ancient stories of how she would choose warriors to represent her and wreak devastation on the world or cleanse it of its impurities. The women would grant her champions with immortality so long as they reap the souls of anyone who possessed wicked intentions. Performing a blood ritual with the intent of self-harm on the champion. That pain and suffering would then transfer to the individual caught in the ritual. All it needed was just a tiny drop of blood from the victim and the champion's weapon bestowed upon them by their goddess. Naruto eyed the dagger in his hand. He had made a mistake when grabbing the blade. His eyes narrowed as he held the blade of death in his hands. It was pulsing with life. Eager to wrap the souls of anyone unfortunate enough to be cut with it. This was real. He could feel the pull from the blade. The symbol from the necklace was calling out to him. Sweet, soft whispers from a woman with an enchanting voice. Requesting him to purge the world of evil men and women. Naruto doubted that the goddess actually cared who was sacrificed to her. The positive intent was there, but the man that originally held the dagger was anything but pure. And while the boy may not be the most saint-y of people, he knew that sacrificing individuals for the sake of immortality was enticing. The way the teaching had been skewered and perverted from its original intention did not surprise him. But he couldn't believe that the woman was all good either. Her name was literally Evil God. Hindsight is a killer after all. It mattered not. That man that had committed suicide with the very dagger grasped in his hands was a priest for the religious cult. He figured he'd have to tell Tayuya soon. It didn't help that the whispers from the women were getting louder. He had asked Kurama if anything was in his mindscape, but the Biju had found nothing. Which meant that this goddess would speak with him whether he liked it or not. The boy began to rub his eyes in slight frustration. Why the fuck did he pick it up to begin with? He felt like a fucking idiot. His angry midget companion was absolutely right about the damn thing. It literally was used to sacrifice virgins. Not the rape part, but still. It was a good thing he was becoming a shinobi. He doubted the goddess would allow him to deny the title she would bestow on him. Those who accepted were blessed with her gift and those who denied were beheaded. His teeth clenched together as he stabbed the knife into the coffee table. The blade sunk into the wood with ease and stopped at the hilt. He gave a low exhale to calm himself down. Getting angry was pointless. It was already set in stone. I told you to be wary. But like always, you Uzumaki take action before thinking. Kurama's deep baritone response only serves to make the youth annoyed. But his Biju was right. He'd have to look up more info on the subject. The old history books are not going in depth. On the bright side, only 3 Jashin champions were ever allowed to coexist at any given time. Which meant there wasn't an army of immortals running around sacrificing people for sport. A mental image of the woman came into his mind. She had incredibly long straight silver hair that reached to her ankles. She had a mask on that concealed her face from view. On the mask were two X that were in place of where the eyes would be. The mask had no nose, but the mouth looked as if it were stitched together. The stitching was sewed slightly up at the ends of the mouth, giving it an eerie smile. The woman herself was pale as snow, with a long white robe covering her body. She had no footwear of any kind, but her fingernails and toenails were painted red. In her left hand she held a goblet with red liquid in the cup. Whether it was blood or wine that resided in the cup was up for debate. In her right hand she possessed a long scythe that was taller than she was. The weapon had chains that ran all along it, linking it together. The chains seemed almost infused with the deity's hand as she held it with the blade of the scythe pointing down towards the ground. As quick as the image came it disappeared. The boy rubbed his eyes to alleviate the headache he had. He really hoped the woman was bearable. At least he wouldn't accidentally sacrifice a comrade on the field. The teen would have to taste the victim's blood before the ritual could even commence. As the boy sat and contemplated his situation, a knock resonated at his door. Naruto heard Tayuya singing in the shower and smiled slightly. He got up to the door to see who it could be. Anko would usually just waltz right in. He opened the door and blinked as he stared eye to eye at Hiruzen. The old man gave Naruto a smile as the youth continued to gaze at him in confusion. Jinchuriki tilted his head before speaking. Hey old man. What are you doing here? The third Hokage took his hat off and gave a chuckle at the boy's question. Well my boy, it would appear that you got yourself into some trouble today, yes? It was phrased with a hint of mirth and a sly smile. The teenager's expression became flat and he closed the door in Hiruzen's face. Naruto walked away and counted down from 3 in his head as the old man just pushed the door open and glided through the room as if he owned it. Technically he did, but it didn't matter to Naruto. It was still his damn house. Old ass still has a thing for theatrics. The youth thought to himself with amusement. Jinchuriki sat back down on his spot at the couch while Hiruzen sat in the lavesiad. Do you mind if I smoke in here my boy? I could care less about old man. That's the 47th time you've asked since giving us this apartment. Hiruzen gave a low chuckle as he lit the tobacco in his pipe and gave a few inhales. He exhaled the smoke from his nostrils and closed his eyes to relax. Don't think about falling asleep here old man. Tayuya and I are going to fuck later and I don't want your ass trying to be a voyeur. Naruto's grin grew larger as Hiruzen gave a sigh of annoyance. You'd only last 2 minutes anyway. She'd be horribly depressed afterwards. Naruto gave a loud guffaw at the older man's response. Laughing loudly as Hiruzen possessed a small smile on his face. It had been quite a while since he visited the Uzumakis. The life of a cage was a tiring job. He was glad Naruto wasn't interested in the position. The boy would blow the building up before the end of the day. He was needed on the field and not behind a desk slaving away for 12 hours. The veteran actually missed the thrill of battle. He was a shinobi through and through. It got old quickly being the Hokage. He had to sign off on everything the village needed. He had to handle the upper echelons of the shinobi corps and had to send children off to war. Sometimes to their death. It was a tiring job. He enjoyed his time around the young Uzumakas. They made him feel young again. The constant respect and admiration shown daily would weigh on the man. He actually missed being called old fuck by Tayuya. He idly wondered where the young Spitfire was before hearing faint singing from the bathroom of their shared apartment. Naruto rose from his seat and made his way to the kitchen to fetch some tea for his guest. As he began making the tea he called out plainly to the Anbu member that was in the apartment. Snake, you're welcome to join us if you wish. It's not like this is business for the old man or anything. His old ass needs to stretch his bones every once in a while. He chuckled slightly at Hiruzen's scoff. The Anbu member appeared in a flicker, kneeling beside the Hokage before glancing upwards as if asking for permission. It is a fine snake. You are welcome to join if you wish. The woman with the snake-themed mask slightly nodded before sitting with her back against the wall with every individual in the house in her eyesight. She pulled one of her knees up to her chest while resting her arm against the knee. The woman's head resting slightly on her appendage. Well, that's the best we'll get out of her. Too professional old man. You need to get some more laid-back members like Kakashi. The teen is making idle chit-chat. A slight exhale of tobacco filled the room before the man responded calmly. The Anbu are the elite of the elite Naruto. They need to be professional. They need some personalities. He fired back, making sure that he put great emphasis on the word need. The boy felt an object collide with the back of his head after his statement. It hit him with enough force that he almost lost his balance. Already knowing that Snake was the culprit, he responded to her action. See? Now doesn't that make you feel happy, Snake? The question was being phrased as if he was talking to a younger sibling. The woman just scoffed with an annoyed huff. Naruto gave a small grin as he walked back with a tray of tea and light snacks and sat the food down on the coffee table. You want me to throw it at you too, Snake, or are you gonna be a big girl and come get some? Another object rocketed at his face, snapping it backwards, and he gave a light grunt. Hiruzen gave a light chuckle as the Anbu member beamed the boy in the face. Naruto still retained his earlier smile and took a sip of tea as if he hadn't just been hit. The comfortable silence settled in the room for several minutes. Tayuya entered the room while speaking to Naruto. "Hey Whiskers, where's my?" she trailed off as she got a good look into the room. Glancing at the Anbu member in the room and then to the Hokage. "The fuck's the old fart here for?" she questioned her cousin. She was clad in nothing but a towel as she brushed her hair. Not caring that there were others in the room. The Redeed made her way over to Naruto before planting her bottom in his lap. Crossing her legs as she did so while continuing to brush her beautiful hair. Naruto just sighed as his hands rested on her thighs. The old man came over to discuss what happened earlier. Snake is being a loser and is pouting in the corner. "I made snacks for everyone." He gestured towards the tea and small sandwiches adorned on the tray. The Redeed gave a non-committal hum as she continued to brush her hair. "Can you put some clothes on, please? We have guests." The boy stroked her thigh slightly when he asked. Tayuya gave a small glare at his request. "Why the fuck should I? It's my house." Naruto gave a slight sigh before responding. "Tayuya, get dressed. Now." His voice was stern and filled with authority. Hiruzen idly watched the scene play out. If the boy had done that years ago, he'd be nursing a bruised jaw and possibly a broken nose. But it seemed that the two were finally becoming intimate in their relationship. He had witnessed this very same song and dance with Minato and Kushina. Many believed his wife wore the pants in the relationship, but it was the exact opposite. An Uzumaki woman could never be tamed, but she could be corralled. Minato let Kushina do as she pleased 90% of the time. But when he wanted her to do something, he'd make it very clear. The woman wouldn't challenge a demand that was repeated. If Minato didn't reply to her denial the first time, then she was free to do as she wished. It seemed that the same dynamic was occurring before his eyes. Tayuya's head turned and she gazed into his eyes. He was staring directly back at her, as if wanting her to challenge his demand. The girl blinked slightly before nodding her head and getting up to put some clothes on. "Thank you, Yaya." The boy responded as she went to do her task. He had a small smile as he reclined in his seat and closed his eyes. Several minutes passed in silence with the occasional gulping of tea and exhalation of tobacco. Tayuya entered the room in her usual attire of a black sports bra and tight leggings. She immediately went back to her previous spot and sat in the boy's lap. She sat with her back resting on the boy's chest. The Jinchuriki placed his hand back on her thigh whilst rubbing small circles on her. The Redeed closed her eyes and let her shoulders droop slightly. Another wave of comfortable silence swept through the room before Naruto decided to kick things off. "What do you know of Jashin, old man?" The man's eyes narrowed slightly while refilling his pipe. Jashinism. An ancient cult that was formed before even the time of shinobi. The goddess Jashin would choose 3 mortals to do her bidding in sacrificing souls of the wicked. She would bless them with immortality so long as they performed the ritual correctly. He exhaled the tobacco before packing more. The Jashin champions would use her weapons and sacrifice individuals who were seen as impure and vile. But like any religion based on blood rituals and sacrifices, the cult had become corrupt. But the goddess cared not so long as souls were wrapped. It is why only 3 mortals are allowed to possess her blessings. Her name may be evil and the practices may seem barbarian, but is it truly any different to what we do? We shinobi are just glorified mercenaries after all. Tayuya's eyes were furrowed as she took in everything the Hokage said. She glanced at the dagger that was stabbed into the table as well as the necklace that encircled it. She put it together far more quickly than the blonde would have liked. "We will talk about your decisions later, Naruto." The boy grimaced as Tayuya's voice came out calm and measured. She hadn't even cursed. Hiruzen gave Naruto a look of sympathy. Uzumaki women were scary indeed. "Yes, ma'am," he replied back sullenly. She gave a slight nod and directed her attention to Hiruzen. "So what? This Jashin bitch chose Naruto as her next champion or something?" Succinct, as always she was. Hiruzen glanced at Naruto and then to the dagger in the table. "It would appear so. I can sense Naruto's chakra surging through the dagger. That is one of the blessings from Jashin." The other man trailed off. "Immortality," the blonde stated rather sadly. "Why would anyone wish to live forever? It was a curse if he ever heard of one." He squeezed Tayuya slightly as the realization finally hit him. He would outlive her. She would die. His eyes became distant as he stared at the dagger. He would continue living on and sacrificing people because of a stupid decision on his part. Naruto gave a sharp intake of air. Why did he pick it up? Why did he let his chakra connect with the relic? Would he and Kurama be together for all eternity now? Would his new friend never be able to feel the wind on his fur? Why him? Hadn't he suffered enough? Had Kami truly chosen to spite his very existence, everything would be taken away from him that he loved. Anko and Tayuya would die and he'd never join them. He'd never be at peace. A pair of soft hands grabbed his face and forced him to turn. His eyes bore into a familiar shade of light brown. Tayuya's face was an inch away from him. Hey. She cooed softly to the boy. It's okay, Whiskers. We're gonna get through this. She tenderly rubbed his cheeks as she calmed him down. You know why we'll get through this? Because we're Uzumakas. And Uzumakas stick together. Naruto's lips parted slightly. He blinked his eyes several times. Had he been crying? Did his thoughts consume him that much? Tayuya gently leaned her face closer to the boy before her lips met his. Naruto's eyes widened at the kiss. The Redeed closed her eyes as she lovingly caressed his cheeks. Slowly but surely the boy's eyes closed and his hand swept through her elegant tresses. She gave a hum of approval and deepened it, pouring all of her love into the kiss. She didn't want this moment of theirs to be sexual. She needed the boy to know that despite everything that's happened, as well as everything that is eventually going to happen, the two would get through this together. The two teams remained lip-locked for several more seconds before Tayuya slowly pulled away. She had a soft and beautiful smile on her face as she stroked his cheeks. Everything will be okay. Break. After Tayuya had calmed Naruto down, Hiruzen wished the two a good luck with their exams and proceeded to leave. He had come to see if the boy was okay. The boy would eventually accept what has come to pass. With his cousin comforting him, he would be just fine. They were good for each other. All he wished for was Naruto's happiness. If Tayuya made him happy, then that was good enough for the third Hokage. After bidding the two goodbye, the two cousins sat quietly in the living room. Tayuya was straddling the boy's waist as she stroked his cheeks, providing him comfort and reassurance. The Jinchuka's eyes were closed as his hands rested on Tayuya's waist. Tayuya. His voice came out soft. Yes, I'm sorry. She gave him a soft kiss on his cheek as she responded. It's fine, Whiskers. He was quiet as she continued her soft gestures on her lover cousin. She gave a sly smile as a thought occurred to her. Her hands began to trail down past his face and stopped on his muscular chest. Thanks for watching my video and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.